Hello again, lovely viewers, and thank you for tuning in once again. I've got 13 subscribers now. I get very excited when a pop-up says, "Oh, you've got a new subscriber, Jason." Isn't that nice? And it is very nice. Thank you for all 13 of you, and I hope you enjoy this one. This one is all about yarn variables, and essentially what that means is passing information into our dialog system so you can do cool things with it, and sometimes grabbing information from the dialog system back out into the main game so we can do stuff with that in our events. In my case here, we've got a simple platform game that obviously I've been using for all these tutorials, but actually this time, for the first time, Frodo actually jumps in this one. This was never going to be a tutorial series about a platform game, but in this case he does jump, I'm very pleased to say. He's going to be collecting coins, and our NPC here, Trevor, is going to have a different response. He's going to say something different based on how many coins we've got. And when you've got 10 coins, which is enough to buy the chainsaw, he will sell us the chainsaw. And at that point, another yarn variable will change to say that you've bought the chainsaw, and we can use that in our events. So in other words, all you need to know for now, yarn variables, it's all about passing information from our game into the dialog system, and then we can use yarn variables to chuck information back out again to do interesting things with our dialog, make it more dynamic. I'm also going to be talking about conditional statements in yarn, and you might be familiar with that kind of idea if you've done any programming at all, the whole kind of if statements, if something is true, do this, else if do this, else do this kind of thing. But if that means nothing to you, don't worry, this isn't some programming tutorial. It's really simple stuff. Trust me, the yarn variable thing, it's really straightforward. If you're at a stage in GDevelop where you can get a basic platform up and running and maybe collect coins, you will find this very easy. Don't worry about it. Anyway, to start with, I'm going to just briefly talk about my coin collection system. Anyone who's experienced with platformers and things like that, you might, I do apologize for that. I don't know what that was, probably time for dinner or something. Anyway, for those of you who are experienced with platformers, collecting objects, collecting money, whatever it is in your game, this might not be too useful to you, this next section, but other people might find it useful. I'm just going to explain the coin collection events and objects, and then we're going to get stuck in properly to yarn variables after that. So skip ahead if you need to, otherwise stick around. I'm just going to talk about the coin collection system. It involves 3 objects and just a handful of events. The coin itself is a simple sprite. I drew it in Photoshop. It's a PNG. No behaviors or variables or anything else. I called it coin. I used a 64 by 64 grid to help me position them neatly. That just leaves our coin counter background here. Again, it's a dead simple thing that I drew in Photoshop. It's got no behaviors or variables or anything dynamic about it, and all it is a background to put our coin counter on top of. And here we are, coin count. It's just a text object. Again, no behaviors, variables, effects, nothing. I put 0 in here. That gives me something that helps me position it on the scene. If you put nothing in there, your events will still work, but it's trickier to kind of do your layout, really. You want to be able to see something to help you position it. These UI elements, they exist on their own layer. I created a layer, I called it UI, and these things live on it. And what that means is these things are always going to be in this top left corner. They're not going to scroll off the screen. If they were on the base layer, where the ground and things are, they would scroll off the screen when Frodo moves, and obviously we don't want that. That's it as far as objects are concerned. I'll now talk about the events. At the beginning of the scene, we hide our coin counter text object, and we hide the little background that it sits on. When Frodo collects his first coin, they're shown. So in other words, when Frodo has no money, we don't see those things, they're hidden. When he collects his first coin, they're shown, and I'll just remind you what that looks like. No UI, UI. But that's personal preference. You might want those things shown all the time, even when Frodo's got no money. But I prefer it like this. This next event is all about the collection of coins then. So when Frodo is in collision with one of our coins, these things happen. What we do is we update the value of a variable. I've set up a scene variable called coins collected. Oops. Let me just show you that. That's made in the usual place. Coins collected, it's a number and it's got an initial value of 0. So what happens when we bump into a coin? We update that scene variable with the number of coins we bumped into. So you might be looking at this and thinking, well, what's this about? Why don't we just add 1 here? And I'll show you why. So if instead of that we just have 1, and that makes sense, doesn't it? At a glance, you think when Frodo is in collision with a coin, you add 1 to that variable. But there's a problem with that. If you bump into 2 coins at once, it's only going to register 1 coin. And the way you get it to actually recognize the amount, the instances it's bumped into, whether that's 2, 3, whatever, is to use this little function. This coin here in brackets is just the name of the object. Remember, it's a coin. So what this does is it counts the instances of coin rather than just adding 1. So if we bump into 2 coins, it's going to add 2 to our variable. So what we do next is we update our text object to show the value of this. So what we do is we take our coins collected scene variable, it's turned into a string, and the string is displayed in this text object. So remember, what we're dealing with here in this scene variable is a number, and in order to display it, we need to turn it into a string. So it goes from something that you can do calculations on to just regular old text, and that regular old text we put into coin count. Next, we delete the coin that you bumped into, and if you bumped into 2 at once, they both get deleted. Then we play a sound, and the sound I made in GDevelop itself using, I think, JFXR. Let me just show that. Play a sound, create. So here you go. You can experiment in here and make your own sounds. But some of them can be pretty ear-piercing, so I'm not going to play any for this video. They can be really loud and really sharp. But experiment with this. I found it randomly generates its computer-generated sound, and I found a cute little coin sound that I liked that it generated. So yep. That's it. So that is all the coin collection system, really. It's dead simple, just 3 objects, a handful of events. But now we're going to get on to yarn variables and how the value from this coin collected is passed into yarn and how we can do some interesting things in our dialogue with it. We're now going to enter the exciting world of yarn variables. If you told me 3 months ago that I'd be excited about yarn variables, I would have said you were crazy, but here we are. That's when GDevelop came into my life, and here we are. Whether you watched the last section of the video or not, it doesn't really matter. All you need to know to move forward and understand things is that this scene variable, coins collected, obviously, it contains the current number of coins Frodo's collected. I mean, the clue is in the name, and it's just a scene variable that we created in the usual way over here. It's a number. It starts at 0 because Frodo, bless him, has got no money when you start the game. Now we get into the yarn stuff. This is a dialogue extension action, and you can probably figure out what it does by just reading it, but it takes the current value of our scene variable coins collected and it sticks it in coins collected underscore yarn, which is our yarn variable. And you can call your yarn variables anything you like. It doesn't need to match this. That doesn't advantage you in any way. If you call the variables the same thing, you're still going to have to pass the data into it. So call it something helpful. I've used underscore yarn so that at a glance I can tell the difference between a regular variable that I've done in GDevelop and a variable that I can only sort of interact with in the yarn editor. Unfortunately, yarn can't directly access the value of a scene variable. So you have to pass the value into a yarn variable so that you can then do stuff with it in your dialog system. So how do you create a yarn variable, Jason, you fool, you might be asking? Well, let me explain, dear viewer. You don't create a yarn variable in any of the usual ways that you're used to creating variables in GDevelop. You create yarn variables directly in the yarn editor, the dialog editor here. Now, you'll be familiar with this, especially if you're watching this video. You've probably seen this sort of stuff before. We've got 3 dialog branches here. This one isn't used in any of our events, and I'll explain what this one is about in a minute. When Trevor talks to when Frodo talks to Trevor, if he hasn't purchased the chainsaw yet, he will get this every single time. Once he has purchased the chainsaw, he'll get this dialog branch and never see this one again. But back to our original question, how do you create a yarn variable? It's as simple as typing it out. You type a $sign and then you type the name of your variable. There's no other place where you create the variable, or there's no box up here you have to put it in. No, the first time you type the name of the variable, it exists, it becomes real at that point. Just remember the $sign first and then the name of the variable, no space here because that won't work. And then anytime you use the variable, it's exactly the same. You see, I use this variable in several places here, and it's always like this, the $sign and then the name of the variable. The $sign just tells it that it's a variable. You don't need to use a $sign in the events. You see here this event, this action rather, that uses this yarn variable. It doesn't have a $sign. If you put a $sign here, the dialog won't work. So you only need the $sign in the yarn editor when you're using variables in there. It can be called anything you like. I've given it a similar name to the scene variable, but it doesn't need to have a similar name. You could call it purple Brussels sprouts if you like, and as long as that says purple Brussels sprouts, the code will work. One last thing about creating yarn variables. You might be saying, why don't you just call your yarn variable the same thing as the scene variable, and then it can grab the number from it magically? Well, it just doesn't work that way. Yarn cannot directly access scene variables, which is why we've got this action and we're passing a value into our yarn variable. So that, hopefully, helps you understand how to create a yarn variable. You simply type it and it exists. It doesn't matter what the context is. The first time we type coins collected _yarn is in the context of an if statement. When we use this one for the first time, we're assigning a value to it here. It doesn't matter. The first time you type your yarn variable with that $sign first, it exists, and then you can do stuff with it. Conditional statements in yarn. This is an if statement and it ends with this, end if. Now, if you think of this if statement as a question that you're asking about the value of this variable. So we're saying, is this variable 10? Is the value of that variable 10? And that will evaluate to true or false. And if it's true, it will print the dialog that comes underneath and before the next conditional. And when it's printed that, none of these other things are going to be true, so it ends the statement. Okay, so yes, only one of these will be true. It's not some kind of branching thing. Obviously, if you've got 3 coins, that's not true, neither is that, and so on, until you get to there. It's going to say, this one is true, so I'm going to say this dialog is going to be put in the box. After that happens, the statement ends, because none of these others are true, and it doesn't need to use the else. So that might help you to visualize it, or perhaps an easy way of thinking of it as a series of questions that you're asking about this variable, and only one is going to be true, and then the statement ends. So you open it with an if, the if sort of question. Then we've got loads of these else ifs. So in other words, if this is false, say we've got 3 coins, that's going to be false. It then starts to look through our else ifs. And as I say, you can have as many as you like. It will find the one that's true, and it will say this dialog on the screen. If none of these are true, and you've got an else, it will say this, not enough cash, stranger. Because this kind of is a fallback, if you like. It catches possibilities that we haven't stated explicitly in our statements here. So, little question for the class. What would happen if Frodo had 11 coins? So you got 1 second to think about it. Right, if you answered not enough cash, stranger, you would be right. Because if this is 11, the value of our yarn variable is 11, well, then this isn't going to be true, is it? It's not equal to 10, or 1 or 2, and so on. And it's going to say, oh, okay, you've got an else, which is a kind of fallback. 11 coins, you're going to get this dialog. Not enough cash, stranger, even though 11 is more than 10. So it might not make sense, but it does, because computers are, well, they're very clever, but they're kind of dumb. Unless we tell it exactly what to do when we've got 11 coins, it's gonna do this else at the bottom. If we didn't have an else, by the way, an else is optional. You don't have to use it. If we don't have an else, and Frodo talks to Trevor and he's got 10,000 coins, what do you think is going to happen? Another little quiz. What would happen if Frodo's got 10,000 coins and he talks to Trevor? Well, if you answered Frodo will say, hello, I'd like a chainsaw, and then Trevor doesn't answer, you're correct. Because none of these things are true if Frodo has 0 coins, and the statement ends when it's done the checks. False, 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 false. Oh, okay, bye then. Yeah, but the else is a fallback. It captures. It's going to catch any possibility that we haven't stated, whether it's 11 coins, 0 coins, or 1,000,000 coins. He's going to tell you don't have enough money. So those are conditional statements, asking a question about the value of a variable. And of course, we can have more than and less than symbols as well, if you like. So for example, the example I just gave about the 11 coins, we could say, well, if you've got more than 9 coins, you can buy the chainsaw. So if he's got 11, he will see this dialog, okay? And the else won't be triggered. The else actually, well, here's another little question. What will happen if Frodo has 0 coins in this scenario? Actually, that's quite an easy question, is it? Well, he's going to get this still. But what happens if Frodo's got 1,000,000 coins in this scenario? Will he get not enough cash, stranger now? No, he won't. He'll get this sentence. I accept your 10 coins. Because more than 9 is going to catch any possibility higher than 9. So I'm slightly worried that I'm being a bit headmaster here and over-explaining things, but hopefully that helps. And if you're stuck, chuck a comment in the comments underneath the video, and I'll try and help you. Another little sort of tip. I've written these like this with the is here because it's friendlier to read, I think, especially for people who are unfamiliar with it. But double equals does the same thing, by the way. It's exactly the same. Double equals is the same as is, but I think is looks nicer. It's more readable. And as I say, you can use less than and more than symbols as well. Now, while we're here, you might have noticed this wait thing here. You think, well, what does that do? Well, it's a yarn command. It's not something I made, and it just creates pauses between words. So in this case, he's going to say, not enough cash, stranger, after a little pause, just like the Resident Evil merchant, which is what I was trying to do anyway. 1,000 here would be a second. Okay, so 2,000 would be 2 seconds. I've done 700, which is 7/10 of a second. So those of you who haven't fallen asleep might remember earlier on in the video I mentioned this branch of dialogue that isn't used in any of our events. Well, what it actually is it's my original code for this video. And you can see it's a lot shorter. We don't have all these else if statements. We've got a nice simple thing here. Now this is an inline expression, and what it would do, it would produce a sentence like that, dynamically. It would stick the value of the yarn variable into the sentence. So instead of having to do lots of else ifs, you've only got 3 coins, you've only got 4 coins, it would do it automatically. But you guessed it, it doesn't work in GDevelop, unfortunately. This inline expression in yarn doesn't work in GDevelop. I did a little bit of research and I found a bug report about it, but the bug report was quite old, and the way it was solved, the way it was fixed, was to use an older version of GDevelop. And that was, so I really don't recommend tracking down a 3-year-old copy of GDevelop or however old to get this to work. It's just, unfortunately, it doesn't work. It's a bug. Hopefully it will be fixed one day. But for now, if you want your NPC to have specific things to say about the different value of your variable, you have no choice but to use else ifs. Here's a little bit of extra information about our if statement. As you can see, I've really stripped it back here. I've removed all the else ifs and I've removed the else as well. I just wanted to show you that it works. It works. If this might be useful to you, this might be what you want. It checks for one thing and then it exits at the end. So if Frodo has 0 through to 9 coins, we'll see, hello, I'd like a chainsaw, please. This will evaluate to false and won't print anything. And the next line of dialogue we see is, it was lovely talking to you. The player won't be at all aware of this step at all. It will just be like flicking between from one line of dialogue to the next, just like in the first video we did. They won't be aware that there was any kind of check happening. So let me show you what that looks like. Oh, actually, no, I'll just explain. If we've got 10 coins, if this variable is 10, you get this you've got enough money dialogue, and then you'll see it was lovely talking to. So you'll end up getting 3 lines of dialogue. So let me just show you what that looks like. So if we've got 5 coins, for example, we'll just get 2 lines of dialogue because it's going to skip over that if statement. Well, it won't skip it, it'll check it, see that it evaluates to false, and we just get, it was lovely talking to you. So we can go off and continue to hunt for money. It's very handy in these games how there's money just lying around on the floor. I wish that was real. Anyway, now we've got 10 coins. The if statement is going to evaluate to true. And so we get this. So the point of this little extra bit of video was just to show you that your if statement could be incredibly stripped back if you want it to be, depending on what you want to achieve in your game. And then the dialogue after the if statement will just carry on as normal, and the player will be blissfully unaware of anything going on here at all. You can have as many else if statements as you like, or none at all. You can have an else statement, only one, mind, or skip it completely, to not have one. So there you go, just a bit of extra information about how these can be sort of configured to how you want them. Right, this is the last bit of the video, and up till now we've been talking about passing something into yarn, the number of coins Frodo's got, and we've passed it into a yarn variable so it has the same value as the scene variable, and then we're doing some checks on that number to deliver different dialogue to the player. Now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of sort of pass something back to GDevelop, really, or create something that we can use back in GDevelop. So rather than sort of getting a value into our system, we're going to create a value in the system to use outside of it, kind of back the other way. So you probably noticed this for a while and been thinking, will you explain what that is? Stop skipping over it. Well, here we go. We're creating a boolean variable here. This is the second yarn variable in this video. There are only 2. And this one is called all coins collected _ yarn. And as before, you type the $, the name of the variable, and at that point it exists. There's nowhere else you need to create it. And what we're doing here, at the time we create it, we're setting its value to true. So it as we make it, it's a boolean with a value of true. And you think, well, that's very nice. What are we going to do with it? Well, if you've got 10 coins, you get this piece of dialogue, and then this boolean is created. It's not created when any of these other things are true, just when this is true. It's created and it's set to true. And then back over in GDevelop, we've got an event here, a special dialogue condition, and it looks at that variable. Again, no $sign here, just the name of the variable. The $sign is just when you're in Yarn to tell Yarn that what comes afterwards is a variable. So back in here, is the value of this variable that we just created true? And yes, it is true. And so all these interesting things happen. These sort of Frodo has purchased the chainsaw stuff. So let's flick over to GDevelop so I can continue talking about what happens. So the first thing that happens when this is true is our coins get reduced down to 0 because Frodo just spent all his money. And then we update our coin counter, which obviously will pick up a 0 now because 0 is in this variable now. And then well, actually, I don't create a variable here. I've already created it in the usual way. Oops, not that. Let me just show you. Scene variable sold out. It's a boolean and it starts at false. So when we load our game, it's false. And here we change it to true. And I'll show you what I do with that. It's just got one job, this. And it controls what dialogue tree is shown. So when we first run our game, sold out is false. So we see the start branch, which is the one where Trevor says you've only got 3 coins, you blah blah blah. When you purchase the chainsaw, when this variable in Yarn is created and becomes true, our sold out changes to true. So this will no longer be true, but this will. So we'll start seeing the sold out dialog branch instead, and we won't see this branch again, the start branch. So that's all that does. It controls which branch of dialog is delivered. Then the next handful of actions here are just a bit of fun, really. They're nothing really to do with the dialog system. We delete the chainsaw, so that would happen. We play the cash register sound, which I downloaded from a free sounds website. We show sold out and we show UI chainsaw, which are hidden at the beginning of the scene. So these things get shown, the sold out sign and the chainsaw, to show that we've now got this item. And in your game, there could be a variable that you've set up that says has chainsaw equals false. When you buy the chainsaw, it changes to true. A little icon appears up here to show that you've got the item. And then later on, maybe there's a puzzle in your game, and if you've got the chainsaw, you can solve the puzzle with it. If you haven't, you won't be able to solve the puzzle. So that kind of thing can easily be done. And the last thing we do when Frodo purchases the chainsaw, remember, this is only going to happen if we've got 10 coins in our dialogue system. Otherwise, this won't be true. We change the Y position of Trevor, and all we do, I think you will have seen at the beginning, right at the beginning of this video, he ducks down behind his little shop here as if he's hiding from the customer, and you just see his eyes poking out the top. So that concludes the Yarn Variables video, how to take information from our game and use it in our dialogue system, and then creating a variable in here that can be used to sort of trigger off a load of events back in GDevelop. We've reached the end of another dialogue in GDevelop with Yarn video, with the longest video title ever. I hope you found it useful, maybe even entertaining, but I don't want to push my luck or presume. I've got an idea for my next video. I have in mind from a while ago, really, these 5 videos. After that, though, I have a few other ideas for dialogue videos. I'm quite happy to keep doing stuff about yarn. I don't think there's much content about yarn really online, and the stuff that is available isn't that up to date. So, and plus, I'm just a big geek for this stuff, so I'm quite happy to carry on doing yarn dialogue videos. But I am reaching the point where I've done the main ones I wanted to, and I'm open to suggestions about what ones to do next. Maybe you've got there's a particular thing you'd like to do in your dialogue system that you're not sure how to do, and maybe I can help. So please feel free to suggest video ideas in the comments, and also any questions you might have about this video. Maybe you got stuck with something. I know this video wasn't step by step from scratch. That would have just been too complex. We'd have been here for an hour and a half together. But hopefully talking you through my existing events at the speed I did and in the detail I did helped you, to pause the video if you wanted to and duplicate the stuff. And whether you did that or not, hopefully you understood what I was doing. Let me know. I sometimes worry that I over-explain things. No one's ever told me I do, but I have this thing that perhaps I over-explain. But it is what it is. I'm old now, and I doubt I'm going to change. Anyway, so comments about videos you might like me to make, and comments about questions you might have. Just don't ask me questions about the meaning of life, complex mathematics, or anything to do with finding a partner, because I'm really bad at the last one, and really bad at the other two as well, actually, but especially bad at the last one. That's it, though, for this video. Thanks very much. I've actually got 14 subscribers now. During the few days I've been recording this stuff, and trust me, I do so many takes. If I make a single mistake, I do the whole thing again. I'm absolutely bonkers. But anyway, at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that I've got 13 subscribers. I've now got 14. So I'm very, very happy. Thanks very much, all 14 of you. But for now, that's the end of this video. I'm going to crack on with the next one. I hope to see you there. Good day to you.